Boom. And we are live with another episode of the Brown Water Banter Podcast. My name is Jared Seymour.
My name is Joey Case.
That's right. And in the studio, the guy who won't learn his lesson. He keeps coming back.
He's a glutton for punishment.
Another one of our favorite episodes with the DMR. We got Trevor in the studio live this evening. We're going to be talking about a few different topics, man. Sportfish, the cold kills, and we'll see where it goes, man. We're going to kind of go all over the place today, I think. But before we do that, man, we want to thank the people over here that keep the lights on for us over here at the Brown Water Studio. Right out of the gate, Dr. Robbie Williams over at Southern Magnolia Smiles. If you are looking for a great local dentist, we're in February of 25, and I still don't have a cool slogan yet for him. But
just brush your teeth.
Yeah, brush your teeth in 25. There you go. That might be it. Brush your teeth. When you're ready to book that consultation, you can give them a shout. They're located right there on Washington Avenue in Ocean Springs. You can look them up on the socials at Southern Magnolia Smiles on Facebook and Instagram. Or like I said, when you're ready to book the consultation, just give them a shout, 228-215-1202, and tell them that Brown Water sent you. If you find yourself in need of legal representation, man, you've probably seen that face plastered on some of the signs next to the interstate and Washington Avenue. That's our buddy Tyler right there from Taylor and Cox Law Firm. They specialize in felonies, misdemeanors, DUI, family law, divorce, child custody. If you need someone that's going to fight tooth and nail for you, Taylor and Cox Law Firm is the one. Give them a call and let them figure it out for you. Fight that case for you. It's 228-696-0111. And it's still not too late for that 25 New Year's resolution. Maybe you missed it in 24. Maybe you didn't get kicked off yet. What?
Bulking season's about over with.
It's almost over with. So it's time to shred down. Kendrick over at Forever Young Men and Women's Health, they can get you back on track. Let them do some lab work. Book a consultation with them. They'll do some lab work on you. They'll figure out where you're at. Maybe you're vitamin deficient. Maybe something, if something's wrong, they can find it. If you need testosterone replacement, they specialize in that for both men and women. So let them optimize you to get back and get healthy. Take control over your health in 25. Give them a shout at 228-363-6623 and tell them that Brown Water sent you. We've talked to a couple people that have went down there, and they have nothing but great things to say about how they feel. Their energy's back, both men and women, and they're working out again. So we couldn't be happier with having him on the show as a sponsor.
You know what's crazy?
I'm listening.
Trevor knew every word to our sponsor. He's been here so much.
He knew exactly.
He was in the background.
He probably could have read it off
instead
of me doing it. But no, all jokes aside though, man, thanks for stopping back by in the studio with us today. We love doing these DMR episodes, man. I feel like we'll always learn something new about what y'all are doing, something new in the Gulf of America. So it's cool. It's cool to learn. But where do we start, man? We want to start with the Sportfish program. It was in the email they sent from the DMR saying that that's one of the things that we would talk about. And Joey and I both kind of looked at ourselves and were like, what
the heck is that?
Yeah, I mean, we know what Sportfish is or are, what they are, kind of. But you're telling us a little bit before we went live, there's a whole program involved. Mm-hmm. Give us the backstory. Give us the backstory of that.
Just to cover the background of the Bureau, because y'all have had a few of them on so far, but I'm the director of the Finfish Bureau. We've got 17 employees. Something unique about our operation over at DMR outside of the other states is that we're in one centralized location, and we basically cover everything across the board. So places like Florida and some other ones have essentially separate programs where essentially employees do one thing. Over at DMR, essentially everyone's involved in everything all the time. So fishery dependent monitoring, right? The things where we're doing surveys and monitoring catch, all the way to our fishery independent stuff. We're actually going out and doing our sampling and everything. We kind of touch everything. Now, one of the funding sources that we do have is sportfish restoration. And that's a unique one that, I've always tried to keep everyone familiar with. It's something I learned about, when I was going through school and everything else and going through conservation history and all that. It really is it's a neat program just in its premise. So originally what was passed was called the Pittman-Robertson Act. And it was a excise tax on essentially the things used for hunting and hunting like apparatuses, ammunition, guns,
bows, tree stands,
literally
that stuff
across the board. And that money, when it was first passed, was basically funneled back to the states at a 3-to-1 ratio. So 1 part would go to the feds, 3 parts would go to the states to be able to fund wildlife. Now, shortly after, due to the success of the program, they implemented an amendment to it called the Dingell-Johnson Act, which essentially did the same thing, but it was sportfish restoration. That was the common name for it.
What year are we
things like-
talking here?
These
the
are
first one.
30s and 40s.
Okay, so it's been around for a while.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, it's been around for a while. It's one of the foundational conservation laws that was put forth. I mean, you think about the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, the Hunting Stamp Act, Lacey Act, things like that. These were right in line, right there after all that kind of stuff, and really has set up what can be, I think, described as the most successful conservation program across the entire United States. I mean, it's stood for a long time and provided a lot of direct funds to conservation efforts across the board.
Okay, and it was the same model for fishing side. I think I might have interrupted you right there. As far as anything that sold fishing reels, rods, boats.
It's there's a marine fuel side of it. So there's a fuel side, and then there's also all the boats, motors, rods, reels, all that stuff. That it's an excise tax on the manufacturer, but generally that is basically a user benefit program. And the fact that consumers are buying these products across the board, a small portion of that is going back into the Sportfish Restoration Fund, and then supplied to the states at a 3-to-1 ratio to be able to cover projects. And those projects are mainly focused towards those that essentially push forward on the sportfish side of things. We have tailored a lot of our sportfish funds. Part of it goes for monitoring sportfish populations across the Sound, and other ones are tailored and focused research projects on species that we don't know that much about. One of the big ones that we've been trying to put out, and we've actually given a few talks on it. We talked about it on the show, actually. It was the Triple Tail Satellite Tagging Project.
Yep.
So that's we still have a few more to put out associated with that program. And actually, we've had a lot of other states get on board, a lot of folks interested in it. But it's basically, we're seeing movements that at first were only theorized to be possible.
Right.
And it's painting a different picture than what was previously thought to be what was going on. And now we carried that project over into another one, which is expanding on to cobia to do the same thing. We've always had this conversation of, are cobia overwintering off the coast, or are they making the migration down to the Keys? What kind of overlap is there? How many fish are going west? And essentially that's kind of the answer we're trying to provide. Y'all know there's been multiple regulation changes on that species. Size limit change, 32 to 36, ships in the bag limit, stuff like that.
It's almost like the Destin, Florida highway isn't open anymore. They've figured out, hey, these guys are going to catch us. Let's go around there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that's the question is, what kind of environmental cues or anything else is going on that might be shifting that around. Now, we are doing that in partnership with not only Gulf States Marine Fisheries Commission, but also USGS has been doing a lot of that work over on the panhandle and down to South Florida. And so we're really trying to join up the entire Gulf, build off the studies that have been done in the past, and really get some answers on exactly what these fish are doing, where they're going, and are they truly staying in the areas like what we're seeing some of the triple tail do.
Yeah, that migration with the triple tail, I saw one that went from the Keys all the way up to the Panhandle in one summer. They move crazy, and then some of them stay here. It's kind of like trout as well. I guess some of them go to Louisiana, some of them go to Alabama, but some of them stay at the islands at all the time. And what makes one stay and what makes one go? Do you have any idea? Just nature?
I mean, in general, yeah, it's just basic animal behavior. To a degree, you've got some level of rebuilding across some species. So if species are extirpated or taken out of a certain area or anything else like that, think about salmon, right? So if you take salmon completely out of one tributary, it's not like they're growing forever. At some point, you're going to have some part of that population or a single individual start making that trek. There's always spillover in some degree, and that leads to, the natural variation of populations and potentially the repopulation of areas where species have been extirpated from.
Yeah, that's a cool way to think of it. Is there a name for that? Like that each, not all speckled trout act the same, right? There's some are, like Joey said, they're going to stay there, like you're talking about. Some are going to go other ways. Is it just like a cultural thing inside of this? Like they have, or tribal. These particular tribe of speckled trout, they hang here. Yeah, they only stay here. They don't venture out. Then you got the other ones that go crazy.
Yeah, I think it's just natural variation in the population.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of our trout are local. I mean, they're staying around the area. They're not pushing out too far. Redfish reach out a little bit further. At least on the tail ends, but for the most part, they're homebodies too. Most of them are sitting around the areas.
We had a comment come in, it's slightly on topic. Milton, our buddy Milton in the comments wanted to know, it's finfish related, right? He said, are we going to get an unlimited shark are we going to get an unlimited shark limit to help lower their numbers? I'm assuming is what he's saying here. Anything on the sharks.
It's probably piggybacking off of Louisiana.
Yeah, so I will say that, before any other changes, we actually have one of the most open shark take limits and everything else. So we even tried to start a commercial fishery within the state waters for them. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago. It was at the request of some fishermen who came to the commission. We went through the process, figured out, the steps to be able to make sure we were abiding by, the current HMS federal regs and everything else like that. I went through it, and the problem is that, on the commercial side, at least, the market, due to regulatory factors like the shipping of fins and the stink that finning sharks has come across, it's not overly economical, right? They're having to ship it with multiple species. They're barely making any money off of it. I mean, the meat itself it's well less than $1. It's 25 to 50 cents a pound, and it's just hard. It's a hard market to get into. But if you are looking to harvest sharks in Mississippi, ours are fairly wide open when it comes to that. Small coastals are relatively low with a high bag limit, and then our large coastals are the same way.
What, Joey, with you on the charter boat side, I mean, is anybody out there marketing that as far as charters concerned? Like, shark charters. I mean,
when you're a kid or you bring a kid down here who's never been here and you say shark, what's going to happen? Their eyes are going to light up.
Even an adult, if it's somebody who doesn't come around here a lot, right?
They do shark trips all the time.
Yeah.
And
local guys, though, you're telling me?
Yeah, they do it. And even like when you do a speckled trout trip, it might turn into a shark trip.
Yeah. But I mean, if you're tackled up right,
you
got all your stuff
they're fun
right,
to catch. Like we did that one day.
It's not fun. It's when you have the mindset of I want to catch speckled trout today, and then you end up with a bunch of sharks around the boat. That will piss you off. Yeah. But if you can throw the right poles out there, it's like, hey, trout ain't gonna come. That's shot. Do you want to just catch these things?
Right.
And you got to have the right, I'm assuming, the right gear, right? To even get those bastards off the half the time. If you do, you know what I mean?
Likely what the commenter was referencing was likely the impact that sharks or depredation is having on their reef fishing, offshore, stuff like that, right? That's where
100%,
that's where the main interaction is occurring. That's where the most the negativity is coming from when it comes down to it. That's where the most amount of take or depredation is occurring. So that's all federal waters. It's outside of 3 miles for that species. So they fall under federal regulation. Those are a lot more stringent. I think it's 54 inches for large coastals, which is that's a big shark.
It's a big shark, yeah.
That's a big one to throw in your box. Like that's a tough haul.
Yeah.
There are some, I think, lessened regulations for the small coastals, but in the end, the bag limit and all that's pretty low. So it's kind of hard, at the current federal regulation for anyone to really go out and make a day out of, all right, well, I mean, I got these sharks messing with me. Let's go ahead and take a couple, take them back to the house, and I'll eat them when I get there.
Do you see the same? I guess the only thing I can compare it to is Goliath grouper in Florida. They shut it down. Can't do anything. And now all you hear is Florida people complaining because
they're everywhere.
They're everywhere. You know what I'm saying? And we shut it down. Of course, the finning and all that stuff is terrible it shouldn't happen to anything. But I think we shut it down too much. And now they're like, boom. Gigantic spawn.
And we talked about that on the couple shows, right? The main process for us, right, is we don't want to regulate too fast.
Right.
That's why a lot of times, we like making more stepwise decisions. There's things that occur on the federal level, at the council level, that we simply don't agree with.
Right.
We don't think they should go, as far or as fast as they do sometimes. Some of that has been to the benefit, but I think a lot of it has been more of the detriment to the fishery, and that's just not really a direction we like to take. And I think with sharks, you are seeing that. You're seeing a negative stigma that has arisen from international fisheries that is basically moved into the mainstream of our thought process. This thought that, the world shark populations have decreased by 75%. Like, while, what they're citing and statistics are on their side, the American shark fisheries are doing quite well.
Oh, yeah.
The assessments, the sustainability of them, they're doing great. The issue is having a large market. I mean, there's a lot of regulations that have gone not only to just the simple harvest, but also moving those sharks around. There's states that have enacted, you can't ship sharks without fins attached. You can't separate fins from the tubes. Tubes is what they call the meat. And those kind of things kind of cripple when you're working with cents on the dollar when it comes to to price per pound. I mean, if you're not making much and you start to have to shave into that kind of stuff, you're basically doing it all for nothing.
Are you very versed on the shark fin game at all? Like, I mean, do they pay more for the fins and they do the whole shark, or is
it's the fins, and I think it's shark fin soup, and it's the, if I can remember the word from school, it's like the ceratotrichia that are within the fins themselves as they cook them down or dry them out or whatever else. They're able to take them out and eat on them and stuff like that. That's what makes them so desirable. I might be completely wrong. I'm trying to grasp that in the back of my head. But that's where the desire comes from.
And is that U.S. market you're talking, or is that more overseas?
It's more
Asian market. Okay, because we've all seen the videos where they're
they just cut the fins off, throw them right back over.
Yep.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah, and it's one thing to deter that practice, and it's another one to then continue deterring the practice through the shipping process and everything else. I think that does take away a little bit from the fishery and the monetary value of it, and the ability of those folks to be able to keep going year by year.
And snapper fishing, anybody would tell you out there, sharks are bad, but they're not as bad as the dolphins. The dolphins is where they need to be.
You're never going to touch the dolphins, baby. Don't even go there.
If you think a shark's bad as snapper, go get a dolphin.
But a dolphin's majestic.
He is a majestic
animal, and he's always smiling. He's never in a bad mood.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Going back to the sportfish, the program there with the money though, and then you may have said this if I missed it. I apologize. But how does that money deployed? Is it in the research part of everything, studying these fish in particular? Is that what you?
There's multiple pots for it when it comes down. So some of them, I said it's a 3-to-1 split across for sportfish restoration. A lot of that one goes to the fisheries commissions across the United States, everything else on the federal side. For the parts that we get, it's basically broken up into different programs. A lot of that is directed research. A lot of that is, focused monitoring research on sportfish species, projects that align with what the state needs or what the fishery needs or anything else like that. And then there's also boating access side of it. So you'll be able to see where, within the state, we've got, a couple projects that boating access is funded. We don't have as many as other states because we've got Thailand's for public access. That has been a great benefit to the state as far as providing access points. There's also a boating infrastructure grant, which is used a lot in the more inland fisheries that have essentially, long-term users where boats are coming in, staying multiple nights, and then moving on.
Right.
Those are overall competitive. And I think there's the CVA Clean Vessel Act, which is essentially around the same thing. So those funds are deposited in multiple ways, and they're used in multiple ways. One, to enhance access. Another one, to enhance our knowledge of the managed stocks and the sportfish populations and stuff like that. So
in both of those acts that you mentioned, I think I maybe misunderstood. Are those federal programs? Okay. I thought we were talking state level. So those are federal programs. Yeah. Okay.
And they positively benefit all 50 states.
Yeah. Yep.
We just get divvied out a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned stocked, and me and Jared were talking before the show. We had some freak nature event that swept through here about 3 weeks ago?
Something like that.
Yeah, when it snowed and there's snow all over the place. Let's talk about fish kills if you can for a little bit.
Yeah. So obviously it's an unprecedented event. I know we've had cold spells in the past. We've had hard freezes. We've had sub-20 temperatures, everything else like that. But 8 inches of direct frozen precipitation followed by multiple days of frozen runoff over frozen ground led to this impact being a little bit larger than I've observed. And I even tried to go back in time. I know there's folks who have been around this fishery a lot longer than I have and have seen similar things. I try to go back to my mainstay, which is Mr. Jim Franks.
Yeah.
Everyone's favorite fisheries biologist. He couldn't recall an event like this happening or anything else. There's certainly been cold kills of mullet, things like that, but we were seeing some multi-species stuff. And the primary area hit was Grand Bay. So first off, I'll try to describe it the best I can. What I'm calling the interior of the fishery, which is the Pascagoula, Biloxi drainages, Bay St. Louis, and to the west. For all intents and purposes here, they were relatively unscathed. They were essentially limited to single species kills, that species being mullet. In some places there were thousands, others there were tens. Some of them were small, others were larger, up to 12 inches. But that's kind of what we saw in the interior of the fishery. We didn't see any impacts at Cat Island. We were able to get out there. We did see impacts at basically semi-enclosed areas that had no large drainage or weren't connected to any drainage of the state. That's where we saw a fair amount of impact. One of the main ones was Round Island.
Yeah.
So Round Island had the pictures that we put on Facebook. A couple of those were from there. There were a lot of mullet in there. I actually got to this call 4 or 5 days late because for the life of me, I remember seeing the sketches out of Round Island and the description of the project and all that, but it just never popped in my head of like, well, there's going to be a fair amount of fish there. It wasn't till, so we had been essentially once the cold kill occurred, we were basically on the water every day we could get out there. I think every day but Sunday, trying to go out and chase these things down. We asked for public input. We got great guidance from the folks on the water and everything else. And we're able to direct our efforts. But it wasn't until after we got through everything that I got a call about Round Island. A guy from the Audubon had been out there and took some pictures and said, there's a lot of fish. And we went out there and sure enough, it was a lot. It was probably tens of thousands of mullet.
Really?
Yeah.
Are those on your Facebook page, the DMR's Facebook page?
Is it because mullet come to the surface to breathe every once in a while? Is that why they're in shallow water? Is that why they got hit?
No, I think it's just their thermal tolerance is just a shave above everything else when it comes down to it. So I actually had to present this to the commission today, but we had a good case study with Grand Bay to be able to draw from where we saw impacts and where we didn't. So Bayou Heron was a single species kill. We saw some mullet in there, stuff like that. We also saw a lot of fish kills in Bayou Compass, a large amount of mullet, probably 100,000. There was all the way up and down from north of Bayou Compass all the way up to Point of Pines. And then we saw a lot in Bangs Lake. And the good thing about the near is that they actually have water quality stations across all those areas. And we were able to essentially map out what that looked like throughout the past and throughout the event. And what you saw is that both Bayou Compass and Bangs Lake hit sub 40 temperatures, water temps, for an extended period of time. And Bayou Heron barely touched sub 40 for a short period and picked back up.
Right.
And so it seems like that 40-degree threshold, which, it's stated a little bit in literature and everything else, but it certainly played out here that sub 40 threshold is really what made the difference between seeing a multi-species kill and a single species kill.
I got it up here now.
Dude, I mean, I know we're talking about fish here, but I mean, can they not sense that something's like, in trout, when it gets hot, they go get in deep holes. When it's cold, they go find warmer weather. I mean, did the mullet just not get the thing, or they just had nowhere to go?
I think it's just nowhere to go. So that's actually a picture of Round Island. That was the largest concentration on one of the sides.
That's a pile of mullet.
I will stress to anyone watching or thinking about, hey, that might be a good spot to go out to, whatever else. That place is dangerous. They limited your ability to get onto the island and all that when they first made it. When I was coming around here to go try to map out and get a number and do some measurements and everything else, I stepped on one side of a pole the wrong way and went up to my hip. And mud, just straight.
That's Round Island you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah. Because it was basically underwater, and they just filled it back in to get it back up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the middle of it serves as basically a place to be able to dump dredge material and everything else like that out there. And yeah, it held a few fish. So that's Bayou Compass. So that's mullet along the side, and it was like that all the way up from Bayou Compass boat launch to Point of Pines, and it's 30 deep in the marsh.
That looks like the little smaller juvenile mullet.
Yep.
That's trout. Yeah.
Large trout. The biggest one we saw there, we saw a few at 27 inches.
Redfish in the background.
A lot of redfish in there. Black drum, sheep's head mixed in.
Yeah.
But mainly mullet across the board for everything.
All the people who usually fish, who fish a lot more than me, say that the bite's really not changed at all. I mean, so the fish, I guess it's sustainable.
Yeah. To be frank with you, I went out to Grand Bay I've been out there twice since the instance occurred. And both times there was a large amount of redfish out there. I mean, it's everything still seemed to be clicking along. There was actually mullet in the back of Bayou Compass. The area seemed to be, still doing quite well. Now, Bangs Lake, I know, is still probably negatively affected, that area and everything else like that. That's probably going to take a little bit of time to repopulate. But outside of that, yeah, as soon as the event was over, the scary part's the 5 days after the freeze, those fish stay on the bottom multiple days. I mean, it's basically it's a refrigerator at that point. The water temps are
Right.
Mhm.
It's 30 to 45 degrees. Those fish are just basically frozen on the bottom for 4 or 5 days straight, and then about the end of the fourth and fifth day is when you start to see those tails kick up and they start to float.
And then they wash to what we see.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The day at Grand Bay, those fish were just starting to float that day because it really, I'll be honest, it seemed like as we were going by and picking fish up, we would turn around, there'd be a fish right behind us.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we still picked up 2 larger 24-inch trout off the bottom. But that was kind of the pattern we saw. So that we saw a lot of dead mullet across the board, across the entire state. And we saw limited impacts to the other species. And when we did see impacts, the most concerning one was the amount of large trout that were in there.
Yeah.
That sucks.
That's your breeders.
Yep.
Yeah.
I guess outside of that particular point, that all of that life or loss of life does stay within the ecosystem, right? I mean, I'm sure all the birds and
you're
the
going to see an
alligator,
influx in
gators,
crabs and seagulls.
they're happy
Those
about it.
raccoons were doing
and the
real good.
raccoon, I mean, that's
the
like
fattest raccoon you ever seen in
it's
your
like
life.
Thanksgiving for them. You
Yeah.
know, like, man, what is this? This is great.
Yeah. And just as, in a general principle, right? Fisheries removals themselves, we're supposed to stay within some level of compensatory mortality. So mortality that would already occur to the stock, regardless of whether we were there or not.
Right.
Density dependent functions and everything else. And with this kind of instance, right, you try to do your best to scale it and figure out what's going on. And as we went through, you could see that the bulk of the fishery, the largest magnitude of the fishery, was relatively unscathed across the board. And we did have focused level impacts on those areas that were mentioned. But for the most part, that's kind of what we saw. So it was good news and bad news at the same time. And we are, looking to monitor throughout the next 2 years. One thing we really want to focus on is, one, recruitment. So are we seeing young of the year trout regularly in our fishery independent sampling? And 2, what do the year classes look like upcoming? So do we see any impact? What size of the year classes? Because up until now, that's another thing I briefed the commission on this morning, was basically spotted sea trout and, where we were and everything else like that. And we've been basically pushing forward with index-based management the best we can with that species, due to what we talked about the first time I was on here, which is the whole MRIP, MS Krill recreational estimates thing. We're basically going down and trying to monitor based on the index. And by all accounts, we were hitting a little bit of a inflection point toward positivity from 23 into 24. And, for all those that have been on the water and recognize it, essentially ever since 2017, we've had negative rainfall impacts.
Oh, yeah.
And freshwater impacts every 2 years. So 17, we had
knock on wood.
22 inches of rain alone in the month of June in 2017. 2019 was Montecarlo spillway. Of course, we all are familiar with that. 2021 was record rainfall in the area. And then it wasn't until the last really 3 years where we saw actually a positive environment. Salinity ranges all the way back on the marsh, which increases your spawning habitat and likely has a positive impact on successful recruitment. So that's kind of the world we were living in, and we're hoping we're going to keep on seeing positivity and that this didn't take away from it too much.
Did you see a drop in? I'm guessing you did. That day of the snow, did anybody take the salinity before and after? I mean, 6 inches of snow in salt water has got to be a lot of,
Yeah. I looked at the water quality stations and I remember seeing a sag, but it wasn't anything too drastic. I was mainly looking for big spikes to basically see if the sensor was out of the water or not. But outside of that, no, it wasn't. It was a lot of fresh water, but it's not nearly what
it takes.
It was. Yeah.
Well, it's got to be great data for y'all, because I've been here 42 years and I've seen that one time.
Yeah.
So this is probably going to be the only time. Maybe they say in 2 weeks we're supposed to get it again.
I was going to ask you if you're going to go on record as
they say in 2 weeks we're going to get it again. But I mean, is
that real?
42 years. And this is the first time that I've seen, or we've seen, anybody's seen it here.
I just remember them saying 1963. Did you see that? Was the last time we had that much snow on the Gulf Coast here in Mississippi.
Yeah, so 63, and I think it was 79 was a big cold kill event, I think, in Louisiana's history. Can't quote me on that. I think it was 79 or 89, but I think it was 79. But they had we had some conversations about that one from the past. And of course, you had Texas back in just a few
Yeah,
years
I remember
ago.
that.
He was there.
Yeah, he was there. I forgot
He was
about
there.
that. Yeah, I was. I was in San Antonio. I had no clue it could snow in San Antonio. It was 9 degrees and it snowed the entire time we were there. I remember Chris Bush writing about that. Speckled trout.
Yeah, the big fish gill.
Yeah, some of the stuff that they had seen over there.
My grandpa always told me about, I don't know what date, but he said Back Bay froze over. That's what that's the old timer stuff. I don't know what he's talking about. He's like, man, there's so many fish popping up back. We walking 5 foot out there. You know how old timers are.
Yeah.
He's like, Back Bay.
That was before you could fact check them on social media, right? They could say whatever they wanted. Like, man,
I don't know what date it was, but it had to be
probably this
long
far,
time ago.
This far into the Gulf was, iced over or whatever to Back Bay.
No, that's why, like, even on the commission meeting and everything else, when I talked about, Jim's observations and everything else, said that doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Right.
It just means that we don't have any observed
record
account of.
Right. The good old days, they call that.
And now we got record of it. Now we got everything on file.
If it happens now, there's going to be 1,000 photos and videos of it.
Yep. And the thing it does set up for, and I'm trying to capitalize on it, is it does set up like a unique natural experiment to be able to monitor how these populations, essentially, do we see places repopulate quickly that were impacted. And I'm trying to get that one off the ground, but trying to make the best of the situation and what happened. Obviously, it was a negative, but what can we learn from it that might be able to, help advise management or help really just understand the impacts of a future event that may occur.
I don't know anybody who would, like, maybe Virginia or like North Carolina, who has the same coast of us, that sees snow relatively, I don't know.
North Carolina's they have a lot of impacts. That's the upper reaches between that and Chesapeake Bay and everything. And North Carolina's, I think, go-to has been to shut down the fishery pretty quick when things like this happen. I think they've experienced this now. I'm pretty sure I saw a news article where they're closing their fishery through June or something like that. But that's been the standard for them.
To give them time to recoup from something like that?
Yeah, essentially, I think it's just to get back to that statement I made earlier about compensatory mortality. Essentially, you're shutting down the fishery to reduce the overall mortality on the stock and then adjust for it for the rest of the year.
Okay.
Yeah. What's bad is we did that whole thing about snook and how they couldn't sustain the cold weather and how we were just getting them back in and then
gone.
We got one in Grand Bay.
Still?
Really?
First, no, it was dead. First,
did y'all found one?
I was dead.
Yeah. Okay.
First turn we went to, we're driving through thousands of mullet and everything else like that. And the other guy, Eric, who was on the boat with us, he's been on the show, but he was we were going down and he spotted something out the corner of his eye. I was like, turn around real quick. Turn around, showing us
snook.
Picked it up, 17-inch snook.
Wow, that's getting up there.
Yeah.
They don't like the cold.
They don't like the cold. They're South Florida fish.
It is likely that if they were in Back Bay or they were in places like Bayou Casat, they might have made it through overwintering because those places are deep enough and probably have a thermal refuge down there that they can withstand. But that Bayou Compass and Grand Bay was not one of those.
It's too shallow. Is that the problem?
Yeah, it's too shallow. There's not enough volume of water coming through there, and so when you talk about the snow melt and everything else like that, it really goes through the system completely, and almost there is no thermal refuge at the bottom. Stratification goes away because you have such cold, dense water coming into there that washes out everything and drops the temp.
No way to get away from it.
Hopefully they made it. Some of them made it. I'm sure they made it.
Man, nature's very resilient, and even if more can come, if some showed up, more can show up, right? They weren't there when that happened, I would assume, right?
Yeah. And sometimes, even when you see larger impacts, you see these mechanisms in the population where you'll see these big year classes come through, stuff like that. There are times where occurrences like that happen, but I think for the most part here, it's essentially just monitoring for the next couple of years, seeing if we observe any impacts and trying to do as much focused research on the areas impacted that we can to really learn from the situation.
Yeah.
Good deal.
Because we didn't even, you talk about fish because you saw them, but then you got marsh, the shrimp, the crab population, all that stuff that you don't see that could be affected 2-3 years from now.
Hopefully not.
At least not the crab and the shrimp. They're annual. We're good. We're good.
Yeah. They'll come back by.
Yeah.
We were just getting our flounder population back too. I hope that. How many flounders y'all see?
I saw 3 flounder. I'm pretty sure in the whole thing, and all 3 were Gulf flounder.
Really?
That's it. Now, most likely, those fish are on the bottom. They don't quite have the swim bladder like the other ones do, so their float is probably likely even more delayed. And even if they were, they'd probably be impossible to spot unless that white's pushing right at you. But for the most part, we didn't see any. Most of them should be offshore spawning. If not, they're probably in deeper areas and everything else like that.
Good. We need them back.
Yeah.
And, I mean, the hypothesis right now, at least the research that's coming out of Alabama, is showing that it's potentially milder winters or warmer temperatures in winter that are affecting sex ratios and potentially impacting the stock. So they're one of those species that go through metamorphosis and everything else that there's the potential. They found in aquaculture that temperature dictates sex ratio. And because they exhibit sexually dimorphic growth, meaning that females grow larger than males, there's a chance that if you have a sex ratio skewed toward males, that might be the reason why you see a drop in the biomass of the fishery, because you don't have as many females growing the legal size.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Justin Samples gave you a shout out earlier. He said, great guy, Trevor, great guy doing great things for our fishery.
Hey,
so
how about that?
Your work's not going unnoticed.
Not just me. I got a whole team we work with over there. They're all fantastic.
What speaking of that, I mean, what else is on y'all's horizon? There's anything out there that we're not aware of? Anything cool going on? Any anomalies out there we're not aware of?
Yeah.
Something in the office that y'all are chattering about?
I mean, obviously, not to get too deep into it, but there's a lot of stuff going on at the federal level right now.
Okay.
A lot of uncertainty on that edge. We got a lot of colleagues there that we've had meetings canceled, stuff like that, trying to get through and figure out what the future's like that is. We've also got essentially what culminated to what we think is the solution for recreational fisheries monitoring in the future, which is MS krill.
Yeah.
We finally came to that solution. We've been running side-by-side surveys, essentially doing, the staff at MDMR right now. We're hoping to be able to get a little bit more support, but right now we're running both MRIP and MS krill surveys simultaneously, which it essentially is
a lot of paperwork,
a lot of surveys, and there are a lot on the weekend. And I know my staff, it's a tough one, and I'm sure they're going to get burnt out. They probably are already burnt out from it, but they're doing their best to get it all done, knowing that the priority and what the potential benefit is for the fishery overall. So that's been a little bit of a struggle.
Nice.
You're just going to see a lot of us out there.
Nice. That made me think of something here. We just came off of a big weekend at the Biloxi Boat Show at the Mississippi Gulf Coast Coliseum and Convention Center. It was a good weekend. It was a long weekend for us. We were there from Thursday till Sunday evening, but we were chatting with a bunch of people about a bunch of different topics. And one of the things came up, we kind of led with at the beginning of the show about the Gulf of America. There was a couple of boats that had some stickers on there of that. And we were chatting with a friend of ours and started talking about the rumor being that maybe the reason that Trump changed it was because of the drilling regulations, right? And he can't drill in the Gulf of Mexico, but if I change the name, we can drill in the Gulf of America. I don't know if that's true or not, but the point got brought up is that do all of I know you can't
you already know. He's like, man, come on, why are you going to ask me?
I got to ask
you.
you, but I ask you. It's like the guy was like, and maybe none of the fish limits now and none of that is legal anymore because of the name change. Has that made its way to, obviously I know that's probably 100% not true, but has any of that chatter made it to y'all yet?
I've heard some, the offhanded jokes about it and all that kind of stuff. And at some point, I'm sure what you're going to get is, NOAA legal staff or someone else is going to come down and say, nope, this all the rules are still on the books. I mean, They are in CFR, they are there. They've been passed through that side of things. Our limits are still Mississippi limits. They still
state
exist.
limits, so that doesn't really matter.
But I think the federal staff and everyone else is going to have a mountain of paperwork to shift everything they've got and all the amendments and all the paperwork they do into Gulf of America.
I mean, all the GPS has changed. Google Maps, all this other stuff has changed.
Yeah, so. The way that conversation ended was, well, why don't you give it a try? And when they put just go ahead and keep all the snapper.
Go ahead.
Every length you got, and when they pull you over, just simply tell them, hey man, I didn't catch those in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, that's old.
I caught them in the Gulf of America, and see how that goes.
That was
my suggestion. Yeah, see how that goes for you.
Go one step beyond that. Go ahead and take it to court and just let it make it all the way up.
Yeah, dude.
Supreme Court.
They'll make the decision.
Yeah. Be that guy. Be that guy. Yeah. No, I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good. I know what it's not.
Well, dude, we always enjoy these conversations. I think y'all do great work, man. And hopefully through these episodes, people are, hearing the different side or getting more educated on what y'all actually do. Because this is a shit ton of science that I didn't realize was going on
I had
behind the
no
scenes.
clue.
And I'm glad gentlemen like yourself and your team that y'all enjoy it and y'all do a great job and genuinely are looking out for the betterment of the fisheries, right? Preservation of the fisheries. That's the goal.
Yep.
Is it not?
Yep, and the fishery is the resource of the people. So
that's right. That's
we try
right.
to do the best we can on both accounts.
That's right. So thanks again for stopping by. What do we got, Joey, coming up? We didn't mention at the beginning of the show. The Bay Rat Bash will be upon us before we know it in the
April 5th.
You can turn a catfish into what are we doing this year? Did we talk about
$1,000.
At least
1,000 doll hairs.
at least $1,000 a hard hit
Yeah.
catfish? Huh? Isn't that a good deal?
That's the most expensive hard catfish I've ever heard of.
That's right.
And we
That's
went
right.
to gaff top, black drum, and white trout. So you can catch those just about anywhere.
That's
In
right.
the bay, off
That's
a
right.
pier,
No fancy
in
tackle.
a ditch,
needed.
anything.
Yeah.
No, just go to Mr. Kenny over there and get some shrimp, throw one on a hook,
Shit, you don't
catch
gotta do that.
$1,000.
Get some dog food. Roll
Yeah,
a
you
hot
can do
dog
whatever.
wing
Well, I
on
was just
there.
trying to give Mr. Kenny a plug.
Yeah, I hear you. I
There's
appreciate
gonna
it.
be some big old ugly black drum coming in.
Yes.
I'll tell you
Oh,
that.
yeah. I think
We
we
are.
had, 42 on the last one? It was a big, nasty God. It smelled so bad.
Yeah, it was
up there.
It was a big one. But yeah, so y'all be on the lookout for that. Registration will probably be up in
About 2 or 3 weeks.
beginning first, second week of March,
Yeah.
maybe first week of March, probably. So do that. Make sure you got the Brown Water Banter app downloaded on your phone if you don't already. Turn your notifications on. We don't spam on there hardly at all, but you'll stay up to date with everything that we're doing. You can watch the podcast or watch the episodes, the live streams inside of there, and listen to them right inside of the app. So once again, thanks again for you
Yep,
and all the
appreciate
guys
it,
at
Trevor.
DMR, man. We appreciate that, and thanks everybody for tuning in.